bin Laden and his allies are absolutely convinced they can succeed in forcing America to retreat and causing our economic collapse. They believe our nation is weak and decadent and lacking in patience and resolve, and they're wrong.
In support of that argument, the president today presented a newly declassified document in the form of a letter from bin Laden to Mullah Omar. Remember him, the former Taliban boss of Afghanistan, in which he outlined a number of objectives, suggesting that they would do everything they could to defeat the United States anywhere. And he argued that Iraq, where al-Qaeda is as busy as ever, is now, as he has said before, a central front in the war on terror. Democrats said just the opposite. Some thoughts on this now. Well, this is a case the president has been making or trying to for a long time. He had a little bit of new ammunition today, nothing major. Is this a makeable case, or has the public decided it doesn't buy this, and is it too late? Mara?
I think it's potentially a makeable case, although I think it's an uphill climb. I think what the president tried to describe to the country is a theme he stressed before, which is this is like World War II. We're facing kind of an Islamic fascist enemy. And I think that on that, I think he could get a lot of people who agree with him. I think the thing that he didn't address in this speech, what the Democrats are harping on, is that the problems in Iraq, which top military officials have said are civil war right now, not just the insurgency. He doesn't necessarily have an answer for that, and they are focusing on the fact that the policies aren't working. What he's trying to focus on is his political opponents want to leave earlier than he does.
Yeah, on the points that he was making today, that we face this menace from al-Qaeda, from Sunni extremism. He didn't use Islamofascism, by the way, today.
Although he has in the past.
He has in the past. That plays very badly, by the way, in the world, and the State Department. Well, I know, but nonetheless, the State Department has been telling the White House that it's not a good term. But he didn't use those terms. But I think that on the issue of are we faced with a menace from al-Qaeda and from Iran, I think that there's on that point.
Everybody agrees on that.
Exactly, everybody agrees on that. Now,
but if that's true, then what about the idea? Can you win in a struggle against al-Qaeda and its allies if you run away from the fight in Iraq?
I think not. But that is the issue that he is not seemingly able to convince people of, because the public does not want to pull out of Iraq immediately. Right. But it wants to go out.
But it doesn't like the war at all. It's hugely unpopular.
Exactly, and even though I think that Iraq is the central front, because all these bad guys say it is, and because if we pull out, we will lose to them as well as to the insurgents in Iraq. But that case doesn't seem to be going over. As to the Democrats, I must say, one, don't give Bush any credit for anything that has happened since 9/11. Not the elimination of Afghanistan as a base or anything else. And they have no counter strategy themselves.
Yeah, that's what struck me. The Democrats have some report that some group you never heard of turned out saying how things are much worse, and they harped on that. But what are they going to do? I mean, it's gotten worse in North Korea. Well, what's their strategy? I don't know they didn't mention one. They're worse in Iran, and it's true. Obviously, Iran is more threatening today, on the verge of getting nuclear weapons, than it was 5 years ago or 6 years ago. So what's their strategy? Well, talk, maybe. The only things I could draw from it is they're in favor of talking to bad guys, and they want to get out of Iraq. Other than that, then they went through all these different national security issues. You had no idea what their strategy was, if they have one.
The one thing that would be convincing to me is if they want to pull out of Iraq and they said, we're going to deploy the forces that we pull out of Iraq in Afghanistan, and we're going to finish the job there, we're going to capture bin Laden, we're going to wipe out the Taliban and all that kind of stuff. That would be something that would be an arresting point, but I have not heard one Democrat say that.
Yeah, and on the other hand, President Bush isn't offering a strategy to make Iraq work other than just staying there. I mean, if there's a burgeoning civil war, he hasn't laid out exactly how American forces are going to prevent that.
Well, look, he said we're trying to pacify Baghdad. Yeah, that's the first. Yeah, I don't think we got enough troops to do it, but that's what he's trying to do.
No, there certainly does have a strategy in Iraq, and it either works or it doesn't. But it's not that he doesn't have a strategy. The public doesn't want to withdraw. They know there are terrorists there. That's why they don't want to withdraw. They don't want to reward the terrorists there.
Or Iran, which is another thing that will happen.
When we come back with the panel, Congress gets back to work this week, and we'll talk about what they're likely to work on for the All-Stars in a moment.
Mr. President, as you can see, we have a lot on our plate. Bipartisan support on each of these issues is absolutely necessary. It's election time, and the tendency is to make everything political. For the American people, we need to rise above this.
If Republicans want to work with Democrats during the next 4 weeks to address their mistakes on national security, we welcome that. It's about time.
Well, you get the idea, folks. On the other hand, the agenda that the Republicans are going to focus on is one centered on national security. Not that national security isn't important, but it's also useful to them politically to have it focused on an issue where they are seen as strong, or they believe they're being seen as strong. Democrats, well, you get the idea. But nonetheless, is there a likelihood that some of these things, such as those that Major Garrett mentioned earlier in the broadcast, legislation dealing with legitimizing and making Guantanamo's operation okay, and other national security legislation likely to pass?
Well, it's possible. I mean, if they can find a consensus on these issues, the problem is that they've turned to national security because they weren't willing to go forward, or at least they in the House weren't willing to go forward on some other issues, like immigration, which is actually an issue where there was incredible bipartisan consensus in the Senate, if not in the House. And they haven't been able to move forward on that.
You do need it in both houses in America.
You need it in both houses, but at least, you know, in the Senate, there was, and they've dropped that. There are quite other big domestic issues that they've tried to do over the past and have failed. Social Security, immigration, and now they're left with national security, which, as you said, is one that benefits the Republicans. I think, yeah, they can make some progress if they're willing to make some compromises. The question is, do they
really have to make very many compromises to put these bills through, or do they get it to have it both ways? They either get the issue to beat the Democrats with in the election, or they get the legislation passed.
In some cases, but at least on Guantanamo, there are plenty of Republicans who have some concerns, so I think on that one some compromises are required.
This program is to intercept what the administration says is al-Qaeda phone calls into and out of the United States, in which American citizens do get listened in on in some instances, is okay.
Right.
This would authorize that.
Right. Now,
and your view is that Democrats will vote against that?
Well, the Democrats object to the blanket treatment of these. In other words, what the Democrats want is that every single time the administration wants to wiretap somebody or intercept something, that they should have to go to the FISA court to get the authorization for it.
Not necessarily in advance.
Well, in any event, every single case has to be an authorization. What the administration wants is a blanket provision that these things would be in the clear, that they would be legal, and that's the issue upon which the Democrats.
So you anticipate a fight on that? How will all that play out, Fred?
Well, look, the Democrats really don't want to vote for anything with the Republicans. I mean, Nancy Pelosi's idea in the House of Representatives is no bipartisanship at all, no co-sponsoring everything, fight everything, reject everything. Harry Reid goes around talking about what's the big issue? The do-nothing Congress. He's not going to help out.
If this happens the way you described, Mort, and Democrats resist on this so-called wiretapping program, who wins politically?
See, I think Iraq trumps terrorism. I just do. I mean,
who wins on that issue?
Who wins on
well, of course. I mean, on that issue, the Republicans will win, but I don't think they can win the way on that issue.
I don't mean they can win the election on that. But,
on that one
issue, of course they win. They win because the country.
So they get a little bit of help out of this agenda.
And that's about it, though. On wiretapping, unlike anything else about the war on terrorism or Iraq, the polls have consistently shown that people are willing to give the president a pretty wide, pretty broad hand.
Quickly.
The Republicans need to stir up their own people. Raising judicial nominations helps.
That's it for the panel.